Hey there, I'm Tori and welcome back to Ranking TMNT Characters. Today we'll be talking about the leader in blue, Leonardo. Let's get right into the ranking. In last place is Leonardo from the Next Mutation. A little fun fact, not only is Next Mutation Leo my least favorite Leonardo, but he is my least favorite turtle in the entire franchise. Now I wouldn't say I hate him, but I have a very strong dislike towards him that borders on hate. The big issue with this version of Leo is his primary trait as a leader is just complaining that nobody listens to him or respects him as leader.
Wait up! I'm the leader here! Come on, you guys! Listen!
There's this air of authority and superiority over the other turtles that we do see sometimes in other versions of Leo, but very often those are addressed as major flaws that are corrected, where Leo learns a lesson about not expecting to be respected and followed simply because he is leader. All of the Next Mutation turtles have a silliness about them, and that ends up being pretty charming in the way it pairs with the other aspects of their personalities. However, it makes Leo read like a jackass that nobody likes. And no, the claim that Leo has a crush on his sister in this series is entirely false. I don't know where that rumor started. But even without that being true, he is not an enjoyable version of Leonardo whatsoever. I am generally very patient with characters and their flaws, and there isn't a single turtle in this franchise that I hate, but Next Mutation Leo gets really damn close. In 9th place is Leonardo from the 2010s live action films. You may notice a bit of a theme with my least favorite Leonardos, since like with Next Mutation Leo, Bayverse Leonardo sits on a bit of a high horse with an air of superiority over his brothers. We see this specifically in Out of the Shadows when he keeps the potential of them becoming human secret from Raph and Mikey, and when Raph confronts him, Leo tells him,
"There's only one vote that counts in this family. Mine."
This is sort of the central conflict of the film with the whole family, but especially between Raph and Leo, and once again, it makes Leo come off as an asshole. To be fair, this is a relatively minor aspect of his personality, and he and Raph make up at the end, but then putting aside that argument isn't really resolved in a concrete way, and outside of him being a dick in this movie, Leo's personality isn't particularly interesting. When a character's only defining personality traits are being disrespectful of his family, it automatically makes me not like him very much. At number 8 is the final Leonardo in the trio of superiority complexes, that being Leo from the 2007 animated film. Leo left his family for South America for
Training to be a better leader!
At Splinter's request, but when he comes back, he doesn't really show that he's learned anything, and he expects his family to fall in line under his command despite abandoning them for months to years. This one line in the fight with Raph especially sticks out to me as Leo being particularly dickish.
You're impatient and hot-tempered, and more importantly, I'm better than you.
Raph and Leo making up at the end of the movie is also extremely unsatisfying and doesn't directly address the conflict that they had. However, the reason 2007 Leo is my favorite of my least favorites is because his mindset kind of makes sense given the circumstances. I don't know what Splinter was thinking with sending Leo off on an extended field trip with the vague task of making him a better leader, because that training only made things worse for the team and family dynamic as a whole. From Leo's perspective, he's always been the leader, the one who sort of knows what's best, and he just spent the past several months of his life training to supposedly become even better. It's understandable that he believes he has become better through this training, and so he's surprised when the results don't align with his expectations, especially with Raph out doing vigilante shit that doesn't align with the way they've been taught to handle things. That obviously doesn't mean he's justified for treating Raph the way he does, but it's at least a little bit more understandable. If there's any character to blame for this behavior, it's Splinter. Because of this added nuance, I don't dislike 2007 Leonardo as much as Next Mutation or Bayverse, but he's still one of the least enjoyable Leonardos and is therefore pretty low on the list. At number 7 is Leonardo from the 1990 live action trilogy. For the most part, when people are like, Leo is so boring because his only personality trait is leader, they really are missing out on the nuances of his character that make him really enjoyable. But I'm gonna be so honest, this is exactly how I feel about 1990 Leonardo. In the first film, there's that classic conflict between him and Raph that showcases a bit of his personality, especially how it causes Raph getting attacked by the Foot and severely injured, leading Leo to watch over him. I think TMNT 3 also gave Leo a bit more of a spotlight, like the fun bit of him flawlessly riding a horse while the other turtles struggle, and him giving Yoshi CPR to save him. Outside of those little moments, however, nothing sticks out to me as being particularly memorable compared to other versions of the character. The previous 3 Leos are in a very similar boat, and the only reason 1990 Leo ranks above them is because there's nothing I actively dislike about him. As I've talked about in previous videos, the 1990 1990 Turtles are a generally solid, good representation of what the Turtles are like in this franchise, but beyond that, there isn't much that makes them stand out above the other iterations of the characters, and I think that especially applies to Leonardo. I have nothing against him, the other Leos are just far more interesting. In 6th place is Leonardo from Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I already know the Rise fans are rioting because of how much they love Rise Leo. I still love this interpretation of Leonardo, and Ben Schwartz adds a really unique spin to the character, and that departure from his typical characterization is a lot of fun. However, I wish he was just a little bit more grounded in that typical characterization. To say Rise Leo is nothing like the other versions of him isn't accurate. He definitely has the makings of a leader, and I think seeing that journey of him taking over that role from Raph could have been really compelling. However, the execution is really lackluster. There was a lot of potential with the way Leo has a history of being overconfident, dismissive, and careless at times, but knowing when to lock in and take things seriously, like in Many Unhappy Returns. That episode is the perfect example of what I love about Rise Leo because it blends his cocky personality with his cleverness and underlying capacity for leadership, and I can't fully blame this show for sort of rushing into Leo becoming leader because season 2 was cut in half. Unfortunately, I will never forgive what they did to him in the movie. The start of this film is so frustrating to watch because it feels like they completely backtracked on Leo's character development from the series, where he's learned he can't really rely on just himself, and his family and allies are there to support him. To have him not only lose the key to the Foot Clan because he wasn't listening to his team, but then to be so condescending and quite frankly an asshole to Raph when he's called out for his behavior is exhausting. To be fair to this movie, I do love where Leo ends up by the end of the film, and he becomes a really enjoyable character by that final confrontation, but this film was the opportunity to showcase how Leo has grown into this role as leader post-series finale, and instead it highlights his most insufferable qualities for the sake of redoing the character development we already saw in the series. Again, I still love Rise Leo, and his distinct personality, design, and voice easily rank him above the other Leos we've discussed so far. However, he doesn't really feel as much like Leonardo as I wish he did, and that paired with the mishandling of his character arc is ultimately why he is so much lower on this list than I know a lot of other Rise fans would place him. At number 5, I have Leonardo from Mutant Mayhem and Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Something I absolutely adore about this version of Leonardo is how much they emphasize what a complete and utter dork he is, which is probably my favorite trait associated with Leo.
Yeah, she sounded like a leader. I do? Oh, I do! Oh, I sound like such a leader. Holy crap, that's so dope.
To this day, I am disappointed that Leo's braces were given to Mikey instead, because that would have been such a cute way to emphasize that dorkiness further. But I guess Mikey needs something to give him more of a personality because he needs all the help he can get. Who said that? I know most people generally aren't a fan of the Turtles crushing on April, but this is by far the healthiest example. I don't know, I find them to be adorable, and the sort of cringe associated with it is cute cringe as opposed to the oh god please stop talking cringe from 2012 Donnie or Bay vs. Mikey. I also love the little arc he has in Tales of the TMNT where he grapples with the fact that he can't just bark orders at people and expect them to fall in line, which is an arc next Mutation, Bayverse, and 2007 Leo could really take notes on. Although we haven't seen much of Mutant Mayhem Leonardo compared to some of the other iterations, he has a lot of potential to grow into an even more likable version of the character, and I can't wait to see what else they do with him. In 4th place is Leonardo from Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This film takes a really interesting approach to Leo, with his primary focus in the story revolving around his fear of failing his family and helplessly watching them die. In this Scarecrow-induced hallucination, Leo snaps and acts recklessly in his anger before Batman is able to guide him out of that fearful rage. Leo's insecurity of failing his family and bottled up anger are two other traits I love seeing showcased for Leonardo, and to have those traits spotlit in a movie that features so many other characters is a delight. Outside of this, I love the final fight between Leonardo and Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul? Nobody ever says his name consistently in the Batman franchise, so I have lost all hope of pronouncing it correctly. In any case, that fight highlights some of the other classic Leo characterizations of him being the studious leader that most effectively adopts his father's teachings to apply them when necessary. Although there isn't much content of this version of Leonardo, he is fantastic in the short amount of time we get to know him and embodies the character very effectively. Moving into my top 3, in 3rd place I have Leonardo from the 1987 animated series. 1987 Leonardo portrays that cheesy, cartoony leader archetype that only really fits old school Saturday morning cartoons like this, which makes him absolutely perfect for this universe. Every time he says one of those cheesy lines like turtle power or turtles fight with honor, it fills me with such a strong sense of nostalgia despite only getting into TMNT 3 years ago. Mutant Mayhem Leo's dorkiness also feels like an attempt to replicate that same confident leadership that we see with 1987 Leonardo, which is a great representation of how fantastic both characters are. Leonardo's dorkiness within the 1987 universe outside of the cheesy leader role comes from episodes like The Four Musketurtles or Elementary, My Dear Turtle, where he has such an unapologetic love for the Three Musketeers and Sherlock Holmes. I also adore his voice. I had the pleasure of meeting Cam Clark over the summer, and one of the things he talked about in the Turtles panel was how it was between him and Townsend Coleman for the role of Michelangelo, and you can tell there's still a part of him that wishes he was Michelangelo instead. And although a lot of his attempts to make Leonardo a little sillier or lighthearted were shut down, I imagine some of the charming little moments that show off the range of Leonardo's personality were thanks to Cam Clark's attempts. Overall, 1987 Leonardo is adorable and such an iconic version of the character. I love him so much. In second place is Leonardo from the 2003 animated series. 2003 Leo does the best job of showcasing all of the complexities of Leo's emotions. He tries so hard to be the calm, collected leader for his team, but it's abundantly clear that he is struggling with a lot of insecurity and fear of failure that manifests itself as anger, just like we see with Batman vs. Leonardo. Although the most obvious example of how this angst impacts Leo comes from the start of season 4, where his regret in failing to stop the Shredder without sacrificing himself and his family in the season 3 finale leads to what I like to call the emo Leo arc. There are little bits and pieces of his anger and impulsivity that have been shown throughout the series. Rewatching The Shredder Strikes and The Shredder Strikes Back for Sins and Wins really solidified this, since in both of those episodes his frustrations led him into a very vulnerable situation where Shredder was able to take advantage of him. The emo Leo arc also leads to one of my favorite episodes as a major Leo Usagi shipper, where Splinter notices how off Leo has been in the past few months and asks Usagi to visit to try and get him out of his funk. They're literally boyfriends. I love them so much. As much as the Ancient One is kind of a weird character, Leo going to Japan to train and move past his fears, honing them to become a better warrior, is such a beautiful conclusion to the character arc that's been building up throughout the series. While 2003 Leo unfortunately doesn't showcase the Leo dorkiness as much as I personally would like, he still has a few moments and interactions that ground him in that characterization, at least a little bit.
It's not your regular mail. I guess Mikey would call it airmail.
I got you something.
A sword. Wicked. I got you something too.
My favorite version of Leonardo is Leo from the 2012 animated series. All other versions of Leonardo either lean more towards Leo being a cheesy, dorky leader, or towards him being a serious, insecure, and sometimes very angsty individual. However, 2012 Leonardo does a phenomenal job of balancing those characteristics fairly equally. I adore 2012 Leo's obsession with space heroes. Every little moment he has geeking out about an aspect of the show is everything to me, and the main reason I and a lot of other people headcanon him as being on the autism spectrum, with space heroes being his primary special interest. This influence of space heroes over Leo has an impact on his leadership style and brings out a similar dorkiness to Mutant Mayhem Leo.
Halt, villain! Halt, villain? When did we start talking like that?
We're heroes. That's how heroes talk.
2012 Leo has little moments of him being adorable, unrelated to space heroes, that make his personality the most distinct and memorable of all versions of Leonardo.
Awesome! Oh, this is so rad! I feel like Van Helsing, but way cooler than him, actually. Way more rad than Van Helsing.
Part of what makes those little moments mean so much more is how they're contrasted with the emotional and serious story beats that Leo experiences. Although it's not as major of a focus as 2003 Leo's emo arc, Leo's recovery in the farmhouse arc being a difficult process not just physically but mentally is a beautiful exploration of his insecurity and the way he is constantly too hard on himself. Eyes of the Chimera from this arc is one of my favorite episodes from the series for this exact reason, and is a great showcase of April and Leo's relationship specifically, which is such an underrated duo. Leo's fear of failure is explored in an extremely similar way to Leo in Batman vs. in the episode Fungus Humongous, where Leo's biggest fear is failing his family and letting them down, and him facing that fear to defeat the mutant fungi is delightful. Fungus Humongous is also another one of my favorite episodes, not just for the Leo stuff, but the shenanigans of everyone's fear-induced hallucinations interacting with one another. Obviously, the main glaring issue with 2012 2012 Leonardo is that for some reason they decided to make him crush on his sister and continued to push that narrative even after the relation to one another was revealed. However, that is such a minor part of the show and 2012 Leo as a whole, and is easily overshadowed by all the ways in which 2012 Leo is a phenomenal interpretation of the character. That does it for my Leonardo character ranking. Let me know if you agree with my placements and which version of Leonardo is your personal favorite. The next TMNT ranking will be a non-turtle character, so when the time comes to make that video, I will put a poll up so y'all can vote who I get to rank next. I have already ranked April O'Neil, Casey Jones, Karai, Bebop and Rocksteady, and Donatello, so if you haven't seen those rankings, definitely go check them out. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time. I've been painting my face with the same lipstick for the past 3 years, and I swear I'm gonna invest in face paint at some point, but that's a lot of work.